Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours, where we answer your questions 7 days a week. Let's go ahead and jump into those questions. Bill, what do we have?
Our first one this morning comes to us from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. Would you rather have an ultra-wide monitor or a quad monitor like the LG 43-inch?
Good, Courtney.
Well, it depends on what I'm going to use it for. If I'm going to use it for a show like this, for streaming, I'd rather have the quad monitor because it would put the 4 different images more aligned with the lens. And the ultra-wide kind of tends to make you look off left and right. Also, I'd like to, if you're using it with an ATEM or something that has discrete HDMI outputs that you may want to put on the air, that would work better for me because then I could see what, if I'm going to switch to something, I'd have that signal and that signal only on one quad of the monitor, so I'd know what's going to go out on the air. So for that reason, I'd rather have the quad, as long as it had discrete HDMI, 4 discrete HDMI inputs to make up that quad split. Or you could also use a device like, a decimator quad that has a multi-view in it.
Go, Jason.
Unless I'm looking at lots of spreadsheets, I am very firmly in the quad side. Right now, there are 2 that are not in use, but I love the 43 inches. It's probably the best $500 that I've ever spent, like single $500 purchase that I've ever spent on my studio. It's just awesome.
Yeah, I use multiple monitors. So I don't like, I've had some quad monitors. I've done quads to monitors, like where I've sent a quad signal to a monitor. I tend to get quad converters that take 4 inputs and then I can use any monitor I want. So the LG is a very, very nice monitor, but I'd probably still lean towards a quad converter. Monoprice makes one. A lot of other people make them, and then use that with any monitor that I want, as opposed to having a monitor have that functionality. But I have learned that I really prefer single monitors on arms. I find that to be much more usable, because I can kind of organize where everything is on a monitor by monitor basis. Next question.
David Brady's up next from New York City, and David wonders, looking for an outdoor rated display as a marquee/digital sign at the Sunday Place. We have a window box for posters that's about 24 by 36 inches. The box is wired, but do I need to be concerned about ventilation and waterproofing?
Courtney?
Depends on where the box is, actually. I found a company, I haven't used these, so it's not a personal endorsement, called Silvox, that specializes in these outdoor displays that are high brightness, and some of them are waterproof, and some of them are, if you're just putting them underneath protection from the rain, but they're outside where they need to be high brightness. And they have some Black Friday deals coming up. $699 off. That means they're probably pretty expensive. But they have 100% waterproof. They're all metal housing. They have a long lifespan. They have super high brightness versions. Silvox, Sylvox, kind of like as if Sylvania and Magnavox loved each other very much, and they got together and had a small child, and they named him Silvox.
Chauvet now makes, or they ship. I think one company makes everybody's LCD panels, but they make LCD panels now. They're a little pricey, but still, anytime it depends on what pitch and so on and so forth. I think the Chauvets that would fit into that area is probably the 4-pack, and it's still $10,000. So but I don't know. I don't think. It depends on if you're buying outdoor ones. If you're buying outdoor ones, you probably don't need to do much of anything because they're really designed to be in the area. If you put it behind something that's generally going to protect it, you should be okay. I don't know if you're planning to put it outside. If you do, then you definitely need outdoor ones. Next question.
Zach Stallsmith is up next from Chautauqua, New York. I need to completely wipe a Windows machine due to quite a few issues with general operating and speed of the machine. Do I need to save the Windows activation key in a document in my Google Docs, or will the machine remember it?
Go, Jason.
Well, if you have the activation key, no one's ever going to tell you to delete it. But for the most part, depending upon... Yeah, more or less, if it's a modern machine, it will be stored.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, most of these machines, like these little nooks, the activation key is built into the BIOS, so you can change the hard drive out to a new hard drive and put a brand new installation that you downloaded from the internet onto it, and it will activate because it finds that activation key, which has been registered with Microsoft in the BIOS. So it's a digital activation. That serial number is registered.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Jason Robertshaw in Sarasota, Florida. Røde announced the Wireless Micro ultra-compact wireless microphone. Would you use a mic like this? Other better alternatives? And he's got a link there to the Røde new microphone.
Go ahead, Jesse.
Short answer, no. Slightly longer answer, no. Because having that big logo, even though it's ultra compact, you've still got that Røde logo sitting on the lapel of your subject's shirt, and it just really undermines the credibility of your subject to be flashing a logo like that. The no with the caveat is that if it were hidden, we might consider using it, but we're not very fond of these types of microphones and how they're being used in production right now.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I just saw a Marcus Brownlee video that he just released. I think it's this microphone. It's fairly skinny and it has the Røde logo on it. And of course, he's a shill for a lot of things, so he probably wants to promote the logo, and they probably gave it to him for free. But you can always cover up the logo with something else, or you can put it underneath your clothing and use a lavalier and plug into it that way. So, but it is a little lower profile than the square ones that they usually put out there. But hey, if Marcus is using it, he has some of the best equipment. He can afford those expensive wireless mics.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes I feel like a lot of YouTubers are kind of reinventing the wheel. So there's a lot of things that they learn and they start doing themselves. I don't know if it's always driven from best practices. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I was just saying, I was checking the chat, and Mickey weighed in with this. A wireless system with no way to plug it in a decent mic, no way to tune and coordinate frequencies on a device that operates on a very heavily congested band, and no way to swap batteries on the fly? Nope. No place in a professional production environment. So that's his take on it if you're doing things at a higher level.
Yeah, and I think if you're a creator, I think that, and you find that all you're using is the Røde mic or the DJI mic and you're just clipping it on, then this is a great solution. Like, it's built for that creator. I think for most of us, it probably wouldn't be enough. I've got a DJI, but I almost never use it. I end up using the other mics. I mean, I use it for fun stuff, and I've used it a couple times, but I generally haven't done anything serious with it because of all the things Mickey just listed. Next question.
Harold Williams in Portsmouth, Virginia comes up next. While searching for encoding software for my new Mac Mini, I discovered many video formats I had never encountered before. I'm starting to think I might already have everything I need. Are you interested in encoding in any new formats?
Go ahead. By the way, for the back end, I'm having a mouse issue, so I'm not moving anybody at the moment. Go ahead, Bill. Or Jesse. We'll start with Jesse. Sorry.
Go ahead, Jesse.
I got a little technical issue.
We're interested in new codecs, but the reality is we push to codecs to deliver to the client, and we want to be giving them something that we know they'll be able to open, whether they're opening it on a cell phone, on a laptop, on a desktop, on a Mac, on a PC, on a Galaxy, on an iPhone. And that means we just stick to H.264 for most of our delivery. We don't really get too deep into the weeds with newer codecs. Not interesting to us internally, but not useful in our pipeline.
Go ahead, Bill.
Codecs come and go. Their popularity come and go. You'll be going along and you have 3 or 4 codecs you work with, and somebody will say, you got to try Og Vorbis. It's the newest thing that came out. And for a while, it may push the others into something. As Jesse just indicated, there are some standards out there that people are really used to, and if you go too far away from those. Now, we are seeing a lot of evolution in video. So as spatial and all these things come out, it may turn out that new codecs are required for that. So keep your eye always on the landscape of what the chatter is about codecs. But I agree with Jesse in terms of the fact that the ones for basic delivery into most professional workflows are pretty well established, and there's nothing really wrong with them. even some things like H.265 versus H.264 have been really slow to be adopted. They're out there. They do a specific function. They have a different and sometimes better quality profile, but it's really hard to get them adopted in a world that is now saturated with digital video. So I would be hesitant to go beyond the core stuff that everybody understands.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I mean, if you have, for the new Mac Mini, I think hardware encoding is built in there to everything except for the latest codec, the AV1, or is it? I can't remember what the three letters are. That decoder is built in, but the encoder is not. Most of the Intel chips, even on the Windows side, built in the last 5 years, have hardware-based. It's not even part of the GPU. It's a separate little encoder decoder that's on the substrate that encodes and decodes H.264 and HEVC and VP9, I think, and a couple of other formats. So if your software supports hardware encoding and the hardware that you're putting it on, like the newer Mac Minis, the M3s, the M4s, use that. Because don't be afraid to use them, because the hardware encoder will speed things up tremendously. And make sure that little checkbox is checked in your encoding or uploading software to say use hardware acceleration. That way it will free up your CPU from doing other things.
Yeah, and there's a couple different things. There's the transport systems as well as the video itself. So H.264 is definitely on its way out. I mean, we were still using it for some things, but H.264 is probably something we'll leave behind pretty soon. H.265 is something that a lot of people are using. We're using it for a variety of things to get to the 10-bit that we'd like to get to for some of those processes. But VP9 and AV1 are kind of the ones that we pay a lot of attention to. Being able to get to those and those are that's the actual compression. Then there's the transport. So how are you getting it to wherever you're going? And so then those start to you're looking at SRT, which is a really popular one, RIST, which is a kind of the industrial broadcast version of SRT, and then you also have things like like the new enhanced RMTP, HLS. So it depends on, and those are all sometimes device dependent, sometimes platform dependent, and a lot of us kind of switch back and forth between all of those things. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Rick Coombs in Columbia, Tennessee, and Rick says, we currently use Restream to stream our worship services to Facebook and YouTube. We are no longer using Facebook, so no need to use Realstream. What is the process to simply stream directly to YouTube with our studio setup? We use Wirecast and OBS.
Yeah, so you should be able, with both of those, they'll use the API connection to YouTube. So you can actually set them up where you put your account into YouTube and you make it available. So you can you can build the event ahead of time using, I believe you would, I haven't used either of those for a while, but I believe that you, at that point, can build an event, make sure you have a persistent key. You should always be using persistent keys, or almost always be using persistent keys in YouTube. So build a key, name it after a standard way that you're going to do it. Like this is the Sunday event, or this is the Monday event, or this is the whatever. Name it something that you can use regularly. And then you grab onto that, within the API. But these can also generate, I believe they can generate a new event on start. I never do that. I mean, people do that. I talk to people who do it all the time, and I just feel like that is the craziest. Like I'm going to create the event and start it when I start streaming. It just seems like an insane way to live, because usually I'm streaming on a real event. I'll be streaming for an hour on that key before the event starts to make sure that everything's working and that I'm connected and I have plenty of time to manage anything that isn't working. So, but you should be able to use the API connections, which is just when I say API connection, it means that it's built into the actual encoder. And I believe OBS at least will let you do HDR and other things like that to YouTube through that API connection. Next question.
Ooh, excitement time. Jason Bache from Albuquerque says, yesterday, and if you were on the show yesterday, you saw this happen in real time, Alex sent me his widowmaker render task for use on the M4 Mini. Anyone want to see how they turned out?
It turned out really well. So what did you, sorry, let me show you. So we have this really, really difficult, I don't remember how many, 190 or 180 pictures. I was working in India a couple of years ago, and I found a square inside of a square. so it's a spice market in Old Delhi, and there was a square that was, I noticed it was inside of something that I had full access to all the way around the outside. So I just walked around the outside and took 190 pictures of the inside, and it's really, really. I took it with a Canon. I mean, nothing new. Canon 5D. That's what I had at the time. This was like more than a couple years ago, and I use it as my test to see, because for a long time it would take my pretty beefy iMac and then other computers and even a Mac Pro and the original Intel Mac Pro. Not the original, but the one right before the M1s, and it would literally grind them to the end. Like it would turn everything on and get it run for a while, and then literally the computer would just restart without warning because it was just too much work. So we called it this widowmaker, and so this is the output that Jason produced. So this is in USDZ, and you can see and this is a lot of detail. So you can really, there's a lot of detail here. Let's see if I can get. There we go. You can see this is a photogrammetry model. You really kind of do feel like you're almost there. It's really a fascinating. Because I took so many photos, you really have a lot of coverage. So you don't see there is some webbing, but not a ton. And you really get a lot of detail. Now, Jason, what did you do this in?
I tried it in a lot of things. I first started in Rhino, and I could not get it to work for whatever reason.
Does Rhino do photogrammetry?
It does if you add this plugin that I've had decent luck with in the past, but it just whatever it was just went whoop, gone.
It's a lot of data.
I don't remember if SnapMesh, which is a plugin for Blender, or Pix4D ended up doing better work. Mm-hmm. And at that time, it was really, really late, and I was super tired. So I ended up putting, several variants in. Where is it? Here it is. Several variants in Polycam, just because it was the easiest way to show them. Mm-hmm. And I kept turning it up and up and up. I'm trying to get the count here on the number of polygons I ended up with. It was 422,000 vertices. Wow. Yeah.
So, and now to put in perspective, I thought this one looked a little smoother, and it's running a little bit better on my. It runs really well for that many. The one that I do in Metashape when I turn all the dials up is 290 million polygons. So it's an order of magnitude. I
had to smooth it so it wouldn't crash preview.
Right. So that's what happens. Like that. That's why this one's a kind of a standard. Is that it pushes the outer edge of what the computer can do, and that's on purpose. That's the intention of it, is to be more than what the computer can do, so we can see when does the computer fold, not whether it can do it. Now, it's but yeah, Metashape will produce a very, very high res if you turn all the dials up. But again, over and over again, we've had it crash the computer. Yeah, go ahead, Jesse.
You're pushing the computer to the edge of what it can do. Can you speak a little bit about what it's doing? So there's no accelerometer data coming from your 5D, but you are working with raw files to have the computer interpolate all the shit.
Do you have GPS metadata, Alex?
No. The metadata is not the problem. The problem is it's deep pixels because it's a raw file, and it is and they're not particularly large. I think it's 20 megs or 24 megabit. Images,
they're just standard 5D.
5D,
CR2s,
24 or whatever CR2s, and so they're deep pixels. They're not super high res, but still high res. And there's 192 of them. And then what we're doing is generating a 3D model. So we're dumping those all into a photogrammetry tool, and having it has to basically take those images. And the first thing it does the first part it does pretty well, pretty quickly, which is that it will identify notable things in each image that it thinks it can match with other things in other images. And so it goes through all the images and it looks for overlaps. And I happen to be pretty good at knowing how to overlap those. so because I've done this for 20 years. And so I make sure that there's a lot of images that overlap each other as you go through that. So it sees that from different angles. It uses that. First it does that matching. and then it uses those it finds those common details, and then it calculates where the cameras were to the less than a millimeter. Like, where were the cameras to take, so they would be in there to have that fall off, and what is the focal length, and what is and so it does that. From there, it starts to raycast and basically use those cameras to figure out where the surfaces actually were in that area. And so then it builds out basically a point cloud of, I know that these points, based on all the cameras that are overlapping, I know where those points had to be in the image. And then it builds a 3D model of that. So it connects all those mesh points together. And then it goes back to those images and it maps the color data from all those cameras back onto the surface to create a texture map. So those are and then it generates that model. And the thing that really usually knocks the thing out is once it gets that big, I found that it was very difficult to decimate. Decimating means go in there and reduce the number of polygons there, in a way that worked. So this is a really good. I mean, this looks really good. I noticed it wasn't probably quite as high as res stuff I've done in the past, but it's a very clean model. It came out really well. Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, really clean and really smooth. And I went out of my way to kind of champion, champion smooth surfaces over, over noise that may or may not end up actually just turning into GAC. Yeah. And Alex has sent me this photo set for basically every Apple Silicon processor. The big difference here is what surprised me first. The alleyway, not that alleyway, but another alleyway, which I am not finding right now. But one of the alleyways is like the amount of light in here is very negligible. And I'm guessing this was early morning, yeah?
It was in the afternoon, actually.
Oh.
Very cloudy. Cloudy and maybe a little, Delhi haze, kind of over it. It was kind of a warm feeling day.
Oh,
That's what made this, part of what made this work was that there wasn't any direct sunlight. There was a little bit. You can see it. There's some direct sunlight, but it was soft.
There it is. Yeah. So this is in the alleyway, with the exception of the power lines, it looks like it actually did a really good job. And what surprised me a lot about the M4 is that as it simplified it, it got much, much faster. And it seemed like, after that first hump, and by the way, the first render was about an hour and 10 minutes or so.
Yeah. Yeah.
As compared to the M1 where it just was like just a car crash. It did an amazing job, and it seemed to get faster as you turned up the detail and basically championed flat surfaces.
Yeah, Jesse.
So Jason, you mentioned that it was like an hour and a half. What kind of CPU, GPU usage were you looking at? Were you at 90% or 60%? Were you able to open your email and iTunes at the same time?
Actually,
or was
I
it
was.
Kind of
wow. I was okay. Yeah, that's the crazy. I forgot about that. Yes, I was checking email, and my main inbox has a million messages easily.
Well, and I don't know how this works. I know Metashape will scale down and up based on if you're starting to use stuff, so it'll actually slow it down if you start using other apps usually, and so it will. So it's going really fast. If you leave it by itself, I know in Metashape, and I don't know about the other apps that Jason was using. In Metashape, if you leave it in the foreground, it will use all of it.
Oh yeah,
it will, and that's why it crashes, because it would overheat the chip, because it would literally keep it at 100% for hours or days, and then just thump it, and then literally it was like a safety procedure within the computer to knock it out.
So
actually,
SnapMesh is the other one that I did, and that is a blender method for photogrammetry.
Right. Prado asked in the chat if the CPUs were pegged to 100% while it processed. Did it get up to
near?
Near?
Very near, and it made great use of the RAM. But again, the part that blew my mind is, yes, everything pretends to be nice, and it definitely did a good job, but nothing ever slowed down. Like, it never felt like it was going to crash, which is the part that really impressed me.
I kind of want to put this on my Apple Vision Pro and then stand in different places, in the scene. So
you really need to, if you've never used Polycam in the Vision Pro, I'll send you the entire because I did this several times. Mm-hmm. I'll send you the folder, and if you put it in the Vision Pro, I bet it's going to be amazing. I haven't done that yet.
Yeah, good, Courtney.
Yeah, so what does it, after it does all the number crunching and creates the model, I was going to ask you, what output format does it use? Just USDZ, or is it?
It can do it. I mean, it can do any.
OBJ,
OBJ,
FBX, whatever you want.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And the one that you sent to Alex, or the one that we're seeing now that you're, what
This
are you
is
displaying in
this
it?
is a USDZ. So
That's
this,
interesting.
I literally open this and I'm moving it around. I'm in preview. Like this is just in Apple
USDZ
preview.
viewer.
Oh,
Yeah.
and
No, it's not a USDZ viewer. This is an Apple preview. Like this is just
Apple
the
preview, yeah.
because USDZ models are supported by the OS.
oh yeah, and that whole file, by the way, 100 meg, 110.
Yeah,
That's great. That's good.
yeah. That's what. And Tom H. Jantz asked how large the file is. I think it's 113 megs. So it's pretty cool. Thanks, Jason. Well done. That's great.
You betcha.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael, and Douglas wonders, Anthropic has announced a partnership to bring Claude to the defense and intelligence market. Is this contrary to their AI ethics claims? And he's got a link there to an Ars Technica article about this.
Go ahead, Jesse.
But where did you think this was headed?
Or who did you think paid for the original R&D? Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, remember the D in there is Defense Intelligence, not Offense Intelligence Agency. And to be used by our Defense Department, I don't think it does violate the AI safety clauses in there in Anthropic's user guide because it's not used to make kill decisions, maybe. It goes right up to the point of top secret information, but I don't think it delves into it. So it helps in analyzing data, especially photographic analysis, analyzing satellite pictures and so on. It can do it a lot more speedily than humans can, and pick out stuff and the shapes of stuff and come up with what the AI thinks that stuff is that the satellites are seeing. So it can give everyone a strategic advantage, but it doesn't. It saves that the general question of using deadly force to the humans.
Yeah, I will say that I like having a house where I don't have walls going all the way around it with my own security guard and dogs and broken glass. And I like being able to go downtown and buy things. And I know that it's a lot, and I know that that's a luxury. That is a luxury on a world scale. That's a luxury for us to be able to do that as Americans. And that's because of the intelligence agencies and the defense agencies. That's all I'm going to say is that we would not have that. It would be, there's a lot of folks that would like to do, especially us, harm, maybe because of the use of those things, but in a way that they don't agree with. But we should be very careful about constantly attacking any use of this technology, because I can guarantee you that the adversaries that we have are definitely using it to its absolute end result. So if we don't do that and we don't figure out how to use it in that environment, we'll be not voting anymore, and someone else will be running the country. so you just this is our ability, our defense industries and our intelligence agencies able to keep up with AI is an existential requirement for our country. Next question.
Next one comes from Travis Morrison in Perth, Western Australia. Really appreciate the time spent on my question a few shows ago. Thanks. I'm still using a 2019 16-inch Intel MacBook Pro. I currently only have the budget to either upgrade to a used Mac M something or other, Mac Pro Max, or buy a used Blackmagic Designs Constellation 2 ME. Which would you prioritize?
I'll go, Jason.
Well, it depends on what's making you money so that you can buy the other thing at the end of the day. That is such a jump. I mean, even just to the M1, unless you have a compelling reason where you need the Constellation 2 ME, which probably will end up making you more money, I've got to say Mac.
Good, Courtney.
Well, it would depend on how old that Blackmagic Constellation 2 ME is. Is it a 1080p or is it a 4K version? If it's the older versions that are only 1080p, then probably not worth it. If it's a 4K version, I'd go with 1080p. You'll probably get more, it'll probably have a higher resale value than the MacBook Pro will, and when you can no longer use it.
Go ahead, Bill.
I just think there's so much difference between the Intel chipsets and the M series chipsets in these Macs that any way you can get out of the old stuff. It's also going to eventually be deprecated, and they're not going to be, the code will probably function for a long time. But it's clear Apple's path, so all the innovation is going to require that M series chip in the future. So I would say you got to bite the bullet and get into the modern computing world. It is way better than the old world.
Yeah, I'm going to guess that you're using the MacBook Pro more often than the Constellation. Now, if you use your laptop as much as I use my laptop, then it might be worth getting the Constellation. But if that's your daily commute, if that's what you're using every day, the computer, get the MacBook Pro. Next question.
Kernan Addis in Melbourne, Australia. Zoom Workplace Pro. We do hybrid meetings that use Zoom waiting rooms so we can let participants in after we finish setting up and testing audio. Once the show starts, we don't have time to admit people. How do others handle this situation?
Well, there's two things. One is you should be able to let your participants in with a push of a button. So you should be able to, admit all. You don't have to click through and admit each person. So at the top of your Zoom there, you should see admit all, and you should be able to bring everybody in immediately. So that should be the case. The other thing that I would look at doing is if you're in a meeting, then let's see, you can. And then Mickey said you can disable the waiting room once the show starts, but that will just let anyone. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't disable the waiting room because I still want people to have a waiting room so that it's very good protection from people just wandering into your meeting. But you can. So there's a couple things you can do there. Again, as we just said, you can have you can just hit admit all and bring everybody in that's there, and then you might have to bring a couple more people in. Design around it so that you're not trying to start either have the speaker show up earlier or have it start a little later and create something that entertains people while you're bringing everybody in. So usually I try not to do that. If I'm doing a meeting, I want people to be hanging out together for a little while. So it depends on whether it's a seminar, a webinar, or a meeting. If it's a meeting, oftentimes you want people to, like, even when I do little meetings here, when I do like a group meeting, like the volunteer meeting or whatever, I purposefully, the first 5 minutes is us talking about fun stuff, and it's just gives people a little bit of time to work on things and everything else. We give everybody a couple minutes to come in, and then we start the show. Now, to go further than that, I don't usually prep people in the meeting. I don't prep people and we don't even do broadcasts from the main room. So the main room, people come in, and that's where your participants are. But we take all of our guests and we move them into a breakout room. So you move them into a breakout room. You're prepping them all there. Now you can bring your guests in as needed. And sometimes we keep them there so that they're off air. So they're there. They can hang out and talk to each other when they're not speaking. And then they get brought in as they're needed, all at one time or one at a time. But they don't have to be in the room to make that possible. And sometimes we'll bring the show back in. Now, a lot of times, we're doing broadcasts, and so that's how we manage the broadcast. But even with meetings, we don't usually we're not prepping people in the same room. That'd be like doing hair and makeup on stage when people are walking in. So we would do that in another room, and we do the same thing in Zoom. I mean, I've definitely found over time we have we treat a lot of the processes that we do in the physical world, we do the same thing in Zoom. So we have extra rooms, we have green rooms, we have hair and makeup. Like a lot of hair and makeup for us on Zoom is to make sure that your whole setup is just right. And we move somebody to a room so they're not doing it in front of their peers. So if we want to pick at people's mics or their lights or their connection, we pick at it in a room by themselves, in a breakout room by itself, so that we can work on that, and they're not sitting in front of their peers being picked at. That's a stressful environment for them. So those are all the things you kind of want to think through as you start to build that. It'd probably be a good special for us to talk about. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York. For a cheap and quick option, has anybody else used source record option in OBS to record multiple sources? I currently do it with the program in preview, and I'm wondering if I can do it with any source I have in my OBS instance. Thanks.
I don't have that answer because I don't really use OBS. So I use OBS a little bit on the PC, but not on the Mac because I don't find it very stable. I know that in something like Mimo Live, I do source record all the time. So we record them all. With any of these, just always remember that a software switcher you can ask it to do things that the computer can't do. So you have to be very careful when you start doing source records that you are looking at the data you should not be operating a show that matters over 60% of your CPU, and GPU in some cases. So make sure that you're looking at that data and not going over 60% as you start to add all these things that are going to add weight to it. But you can do it. Jeremy Murray also said yes, you can. But you can, but should you? And the should comes into looking at your how powerful your CPU and GPU are, and whether they're and how taxed they are. If you want to ask questions, of course, you can use Mukana. And if you don't know how to get to Mukana, you can go to officehours.global/join. As you sign up there, you'll get an email, and then you'll start getting emails every day, and they'll give you links to Mukana, Discord, all kinds of other fun things. Next question.
Next one comes from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. Some of us use Mac and PC equally without bias. What are the tips for making the two platforms more consistent and compatible?
Good, Courtney.
The one thing I used to do when I used to have this problem, because on Dexter we had some people with PCs, some people with MacBook Pros, and we had to put up playback stuff on both of them and go between them sometimes. And so transferring files became an issue. So I installed Parallels or other means of running a virtual version of Windows on all the MacBook Pros. So if we had stuff that came in that was for Windows, we could just open up a window and play back in Windows on that MacBook Pro, and did that many times. It's also possible Parallels and most of the other virtual type programs that will run Windows on the Mac. You can't go the other way around. You can't run the Mac on a Windows machine without running, just the Mac operating system as a Hackintosh. But it has a method for transferring files between the two platforms internally, so that makes the file transfer much easier. If you don't have that, then I would suggest using Google Drive, which is a cross-platform program where you can store files and transfer them easily, and use Chrome as your browser on both platforms. And that way it gives you a window into your Google Drive easier, so that you can easily transfer files between the two of them. So that's one way to do it. And with Parallels, you can actually, you're running both operating systems, and you can keep a desktop with just your Mac stuff on it and slide over, and then there's your Windows stuff on it, all on one piece of hardware, and that makes it very convenient. You do, however, have to purchase that Windows license, and these days you have to purchase Windows 11 for ARM. Make sure you get the right edition to run on that MacBook Pro if it's or a new Mac Mini if it's running the M2 or later processors.
Go, Jason.
So I'm not without bias or my own opinions, but in the real world, I'd say I'm about 50-50. I support lots of businesses that truly do use both hand in hand. I make more money on the PCs because they mess up more. So there it is. But to answer your question, I would say get a good KVM switch and get a NAS so that your files are consistent, so the downloads are in downloads, so the documents are in documents, so the desktop is in desktop. And that can be done cross-platform and, even across the world if you wanted it to.
Good. Go, Bill.
Yeah, for me, it's just a matter of they are a little bit different in terms of the APIs and libraries that they call upon. And that's what, to me, that's kind of what makes the two systems. I don't think either of them are better or worse than the other. It just depends on which way your workflow goes. I think of it a little bit like, do you need a claw hammer or a ball peen hammer? They're both really great tools. If you're working with metal, you're probably going to lean in the direction of the ball peen. If you're working with wood, you're going to have the claw hammer. These things are required for your efforts, but they are different in terms of the facility with which you can do a type of work that may be what you do. You should never discount the other side, because there are a lot of people who don't work the same way you do or think the same way you do. But I do think there is a significant difference, and I don't think they're ever going to meld, because I think those core APIs and libraries were just created differently for different purposes.
Next question.
David Brady, New York City. Airtags are getting an upgrade. Apple has added a share item location feature, but they are soon partnering with airlines for luggage tracking. Thank you. What does the panel think? And it's got a link to the Apple newsroom for their announcement.
I think this is for I know where it is, and I'm going to show you where it is. Let me share this with you to make this to underline the point, because I've had a couple of those. I have to admit, I FedExed something out yesterday, and I realized I should be putting these in my FedEx. Like I should just putting them, like to something that matters. I should be throwing those in. I'm going to start doing that. I have a couple of them just floating around. I'm at the max, by the way. So any new tracker that I add has to be. I have to get rid of something else. so good. It's like an Interstellar. When you're going to add something, you got to take something away. Go ahead, Jason.
How many? What's the max number of?
Yeah, I was about 30. To ask.
I think it's 30. I have
30.
I'll find my phone. I'll take. I just.
You know what?
Count them. But I think it's 30 or 32 or something like that. But it now is telling me, yeah, you can't.
I bet if you have family members that add them, that those two will show up. Just saying. I may or may not know that.
No, they haven't.
Really?
Or maybe I haven't turned a setting on, but yeah, we don't see each other's trackers.
It worked for me. So the neat part about this for me is that the Airtags are not getting an update. Instead, the infrastructure that supports them is. It's happening all around you and automatically. And that is profoundly cool. I think the airlines are I want to read the privacy policies in these apps, but assuming nothing egregious, I think they're just tired of looking like idiots when I have more than once walked into the ticketing office and said, "Why is my thing in Memphis?" Right.
Yeah, it always goes to Memphis, doesn't it? No. I'm surprised. I think that there's going to be. I do think more and more cases that we've seen a couple of them come out where you can snap the AirPod into them. Like they have a whole. Inside of them, like in my bags, I usually find the most obscure place to put them, and I tape them in. Like I took apart my my carry-on that I sometimes check, and then installed it, and put it out there. And but I put them on everything, like backpacks and car. That's why I'm out of space, is because I put it on everything. But it's funny to watch, like when you have 10 bags you're flying to, let's say, to New York with or whatever, you see this little cloud of bags that are going along together. One of them's always falling behind. You're afraid it fell off, but it just didn't update yet. So, oh yeah, I got it. I'm 10 miles down. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, it kind of depends on how your luggage is lost and whether this will be useful, because those Airtags depend on the fact that it ends up within low power Bluetooth range of people carrying iPhones. And that's great if your luggage is misrouted to another airport and it's going around on a carousel somewhere in another airport. But a lot of bags get lost inside the system, like in the big airport luggage processing.
But the throwers have iPhones too. I mean.
Well, yeah, but here's where it goes wrong. Like in LAX, it goes through all these little conveyor belts that go up and down and around and over and transfer from one conveyor belt to another. And if a piece of luggage clogs up and falls off that conveyor belt and it ends up in the bottom of a warehouse in the depths of the airport, nobody ever gets near it. So you'll never find it that way. Or if it ends up in an airport in the middle of Timbuktu where there are no cell towers or anything, it's going to get lost. The luggage tracking tags, then the airport will usually has the barcode readers that they slap on those international luggage pieces that track it through their system, so they will know the last tracker it went through, but they won't know necessarily where it ended up. So I guess it depends on where your luggage ended up as to the efficiency of using those tags for tracking.
And so far, it's been really efficient. I don't know. I do agree with all the theoretical things, but I can say that there's been no bag so far that I didn't know where it was at all times. Now, I haven't left the country, but in the country, and even to the point where FedEx was missing some of our bags, and I said, well, 5 of them are in your northeast corner of your LAX, warehouse, and 1 is in the southwest corner, and I could tell them within 10 feet of where it was. And I couldn't tell over the phone whether they're impressed or extremely annoyed. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I think the things that are interesting to me, there's 2 things going on right now. I've seen I've been bicycling more, and I have a pretty fancy bike, and I installed a bell that has an AirTag holder, so it's kind of stealthy. I don't even know if somebody's stealing it. Probably shouldn't have said that on the air, because now somebody's going to know to take the bell off.
Yeah, take everybody's bell off.
Yeah, that's right. But there are more and more of those kinds of things that are built to hold an AirTag and not be obvious about it. So that is one function. The other thing is, I can't remember what the other thing is, so I'm not going to say it.
Next question.
Next question comes to us from Guy Cochran in Seattle. DaVinci Resolve 19.1 update released with support for encoding MV HEVC spatial video on Mac. What does this mean for creators?
Go, Jason.
Hopefully, it means a whole lot of content for the Vision Pro, in about a year and a half or 5 years, depending upon, when Hollywood decides to really start playing with it.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting. It is it's exciting to be able to have that available. So what it should mean is that we could build 3D, and we haven't. It literally came out last night or yesterday, right before our show, and so I haven't had time to download it and play with it. I'm going to be looking at it today and trying to generate something. A couple things. One is because it can write it. It also means that we can take MV. We start editing now MV HEVC. Now I would be surprised if we don't see something pretty soon from Apple that can do this from Final Cut. Isn't the big show today, or is it?
No, it's tomorrow. It starts on technically Thursday. People are arriving today. It'll be Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So we're about to see a flood of information from the Apple ecosystem about what's happening with Final Cut. And I wouldn't be surprised if Resolve is part of their on-stage presentations because they work so closely with them.
Yeah. So I think that, and I think that it's been. I think it's been great for Apple to build this relationship with Resolve because it kind of shows that they're working with other people. It gets past a lot of the antitrust sensitivities that people have. And also, it allows Final Cut to remain, fast and flexible and do what it does while you still have this big heavy lifter of Resolve to, solve a lot of tweaky problems that you have with these things. But being able to write it means you can also be able to edit it. So now you're able to edit the MV HEVC, but you can also write it. But theoretically, you can generate new content in 3D inside of using Fusion and other things to do 3D comps. Again, I'd be surprised if we don't see something from Apple relatively soon, possibly today or tomorrow. But usually before this conference, we see some, at least whatever they're going to do this year, it's going to happen in the next 2 days. If it doesn't happen, sometimes they do previews and it comes out a couple weeks later if they're running a little behind. But so the rumor is that we'll see mostly updates to Final Cut and not so much motion. But we'll see what that actually. I would love to see them at least allow motion to write in the same way, write MV HEVC. But it also means that you can take my guess is it's going to allow you to take side by side footage that you may shoot in other cameras and be able to composite those back together into MV HEVC and then be able to publish them. And there's, that's been a little bit of a work problem for people. And I think that is what's really exciting about what will probably happen in the next 3 or 4 months. We're starting to see some really compelling content on the Apple Vision Pro. We saw Submerged. We have The Weeknd is his music experience. I don't know what that means, but the 3D music experience is coming out on Thursday. So Apple's starting to, as they start working with partners and working with the cameras to really push the development of the content, they're also fixing the tool problems. And this has been a problem for 180 stereo and 360 stereo and 360 since they started. For 25 years, having tools that allow us to easily produce this content has been something that we didn't have. And you had to be really geeky about everything every time you did it. And I've been in that world for a long time. And I'm super excited about the fact that suddenly it's going to be really easy for people to create this content. I think you're going to see an explosion, as Jason said. Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. What's the best budget LED wall, 85-inch and up? Best price, performance, and bang for the buck? And what's the sweet spot?
Sweet spot is buying a monitor. 85-inch or 98-inch. LG makes them. A couple other folks make them. But don't get an LED wall at that size. It'll be 3 or 4 times as expensive at least. 85-inch monitors now. TCL makes one, I think, now because if you're going to use it for behind you as opposed to in front of you, TCL makes an 85-inch that is, I think, less than $1,000. So
Sam's Club, $899. I saw it yesterday.
$899, yeah, for the TCL 85-inch. And so if it's 85-inch and up, and there are some LG, I said, has a 98-inch. They're going to get into the $2,000 or $3,000 range at the 98-inch. If you're using it as a backup, and again, the smallest we've done virtual backgrounds for people is 70 inches, and it's too small. Like, we've figured it out, but it's right up against them, and it's a long lens, and So we did find that 85-inch was the right size for virtual backgrounds for folks. It gave us a little bit more room to work with. So 85 inch is great. 75 can work relatively often. 70 is a little tight. 85 is a great size for a background if that's what you're using it for. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, there is a 98-inch ViewSonic that I think they have on sale now for, $3,440 off for $64.99. This is a 98-inch, I think, at CDW. So you can get them under $10,000 for the 100, the 98 to 100 to 110 inches, I think is the biggest, one of the biggest single LCD that you can get out there. And these are 4K units, so that LCD panel is going to have a much tighter pitch than any LED wall you can come up with, because those are going to be like 0.5 millimeters, minimum. The smallest distance between the pixels, and so these will beat that by a large degree, as far as fighting moire goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York. What are some benefits of using a vehicle like Zixi to send a stream out instead of just sending directly from software to a platform?
Most people will argue that Zixi is the most stable way to stream something across the internet. It is marginally better than Rist and SRT, and much better than everything else. And this has to do with their own kind of special sauce as related to their network monitoring. The network monitoring within the system is more advanced than Rist and SRT. And so they're able to flex with bandwidth up and down more effectively. I would say it's marginal. If someone said, what's the percentage better, 10 or 15% better than SRT and Rist. And again, SRT is kind of the one everyone talks about. Rist is kind of the industrial one. A lot of big encoder stuff that we uses Rist, which is very similar to SRT. So Zixi it's expensive, but it is definitely the most stable, especially over a network that's changing in bandwidth, and it's very graceful about how it falls apart. So as it goes down, you can get down to 1 megasecond, and it's still putting out as good an image as you're going to get. And it goes up to 10 or 20 megs a second, it'll expand that back up, and it's using a lot of its own proprietary approaches to make that actually happen. So that's why you would use it, is if you're in a location that is not as stable. I use the Elemental Links actually use Zixi plus a little bit of Elemental extra sauce on top of Zixi even, and they do that with the links so that they are very, very robust coming out of a location and knowing that it's going to work. Now, you don't use it typically as a contribution to like something like YouTube. YouTube would never make Zixi possible because it breaks most of the rules of the internet. So it doesn't. It's like someone who Zixi is like a big tractor trailer truck that's not paying attention to any of the stoplights. Like it's just like I got to get data over here. My only job is to get the data over there, and it would bring down the internet if they made it available to everyone. So it works well for people like us who needed to always work, but you couldn't make it a more widely available platform. So that's why you would use it. If you've got great bandwidth and it's clean bandwidth, you probably don't need it. But if you think that you may have some contested bandwidth, then Zixi is a pretty powerful tool. SRT and Rist will do most of what Zixi does without the cost. So it's not something that you need to do. But if you really want the very best coming out of a location that might be contested, then Zixi is the best in the world. Next question.
David Brady in New York City up next. What are the pin groups in Zoom, and how are they set up and used?
So I have to admit that I've played with pin groups a couple times, but because almost everything we do with Zoom, all we do is use Zoom to aggregate the video signals, and then we put them into a separate package and send them out. So the pin groups in Zoom are not something I'm as familiar with because of that. And so I, generally these are groupings of, I want to pin, if I remember correctly, it's been a long time since I played with them. It is, you can grab it, you can have presets of what those pins are, to make that work. But again, I'm afraid that now you're getting into a part of Zoom that I'm not as facile with anymore. Next question.
Chester Sweeney in Las Vegas, Nevada wonders, best cameras to attach outside to film an F1 car during the championships. I don't watch sports much.
Go ahead, Bill.
I don't think you're actually talking about it. No one in Formula One is going to let you attach anything to any of those cars first and foremost.
You'd be surprised.
You think they'll let you put something on that might cause drag in a race like that with that much money on the line?
Well, they have their own camera systems for
inside the F1 group. But somebody coming from the outside saying, "I want to hook a camera on your Formula One car," I think they're going to.
When I was surprised,
this
is from years ago. This was not during the race. But this is a GoPro, and we literally superglued it to Mario Andretti's dual seater. This is an Indy car, not F1. They're very touchy about that, by the way. It's an Indy car or F1. So anyway, but this was a GoPro, and what we did is we ran it into this encoder, this tear deck, and then that converted it to bits, and then we built a mesh at the Sonoma Raceway, and the tricky part is being able to jump from transceiver to transceiver at 150 miles an hour. It turns out there's a lot of tuning that's required to make that work. But that's how that we and what I was amazed by was that they so quickly said, yeah, sure, whatever. We'll just super glue it. We'll paint it over later. But yeah, during the race, you're not going to be able to do that. Bill is 100% right. So they have a ton of cameras that are already built into the cameras and telemetry that are already built into the F1 racers. So I think that the team, we know somebody that spent a lot of time working there. We'll see if we can get him to come back into.
That was a great episode.
We had somebody come into after hours.
That was so cool.
That broke down a lot of the broadcast stuff with F1. I'll see if we can get him back. We'll talk to him about that.
It's like the rocket guy who told us about how those rockets, those are such special access to these. And somebody on the inside, yes, they are definitely doing that for the team, but not during a race, and definitely not from a civilian on the outside. They're not going to let you attach anything to anything. Yes. Not going to let you on the track, period.
Yeah, exactly. Courtney.
Yeah, and it kind of depends on whether you just said film the F1 car during the championship. Are you going to broadcast it live, or are you just going to obtain footage that you can build a documentary about later? If you're doing that, where you don't have to worry about broadcasting and reaching, like Alex said, the different transfer points that it's switching between as it goes around the track to try and do some type of live broadcast, plus they're not going to let you put anything that transmits anything on top of those cars because all the telemetry they're transmitting back from that car during the championship. But you might be able to get away with sticking a small Insta360 because they're very low profile, and stick it somewhere where it can see out during time trials where they won't, where there won't be an objection to you slowing the car down by any means.
Yeah, I think that. Because I think
interesting views later in post,
Because I think that Chester lives in Vegas, and there's definitely a lot of stuff there. I think you might be able to do something from, if you have a good vantage point, using some kind of camera, but you're not going to get anywhere near F1 to do anything. They have a lot of cameras, and they're pretty proprietary. They spend a lot of money. That's a big project for them. Anyway, we'll try to do an after hours, another private session with that. Next question.
I have to say it because Mickey said Cardellini to the spoiler. Simple.
Yeah, exactly.
A duckbill.
there's a production joke. Cardellini to the spoiler. Just it's 38, 37, 38, whatever it takes. Anyway, next question.
Next question. A question comes from us from Mike Edwards in Brooklyn, New York. Morning, everyone. Looking back on the Google Project Ara from 2014, what would the panel say was the problem with the concept, and would it still be a problem in 2024?
I realized I actually streamed that launch. I was like, oh, I remember that phone. I did the event for that. This is what it was. This is a modular. The idea was a modular phone. Let me see if I can get this to go. Yeah. So the idea is you could have lots of different pieces, and you had little sections, and so it would allow developers to be able to develop their own pieces and their own ways of configuring the phone. Incredible idea. The problem is that there's a lot of wear and tear problems with it. There's also a lot of efficiency problems, and fundamentally, I think in the end it was just that people just wanted. There's not that many people that want to mess with their phone. It just wasn't. It couldn't support the small scale. You needed a lot of people to want to do this, and most people just wanted their phone to work. Go ahead, Jesse.
Yeah, bang on. But I think it would be even more difficult to sell this now because 10 years ago we were seeing advancements in chipsets on phones that were actually significant enough that year by year you might consider swapping out the processor. At this point, like the year by year advancements in processing are so much smaller than 10 years ago on the cell phone scale that it is, completely silly to try to implement that now.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and as far as marketing, it's counterproductive to keep you from upgrading your phone versus forcing you to upgrade your phone. So if you can just replace the camera because there's a newer, better camera out module, you're not going to replace your whole phone. And, these hardware manufacturers make money by selling individual units. They don't make as much money by selling a component of that unit. So making them individually upgradable is a bad marketing concept, and that's probably why it failed, because nobody wanted to invest, none of the manufacturers wanted to invest in something that would prevent people from wanting to upgrade every 2 years.
Thanks, everyone. Quick reminder, of course, that we are still selling shirts until the 20th. You can go to officehours.global/shop and buying those shirts not only get you a cool shirt, the first edition of our shirts, but it also helps support us and make sure that we can keep doing this. So officehours.global/join. Thanks to all the great questions. If we sent your question back to you, always remember that goes into your notes. You can bring it back in Makana. If you submitted it via a QR code, we'll bring it back in the next day. So take a look at that and make sure that when you think about those questions, just make sure that they're nice and clear, especially in the QR code. If you make it complicated, we tend not to bring them in. Thanks so much, though. Thanks for a lot of great questions. Thank you to the panelists, of course. We can't do this without you. It was a great conversation, as always. And thanks to the incredible team, the dev team, the management teams, the production teams that make all of this work 7 days a week, more than 7 days a week, because we've got evening shows and we've got all kinds of other things that are happening. We had a great conversation with Extra Hours last night. We have the rundown on Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So a lot of other shows that are available, and we really appreciate all the teams that support making all of those actually work. The Tlaloc traversal, if we had traveled by foot or by plane or even by car, we still would have covered the same number of miles. That's 32,000 miles, 51,000 kilometers, and that is 253 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours.
Chester, you should look up what the FCC does. We didn't get to that question, but yeah, RC cars, not a thing.
Here we go. That's good. I missed that. I was like, oh, that was a great event. That was the first use of I just bought BRC 900s and or maybe 1000s, and we hung them above so that modular phone. We had these two PTZs that are 20X that are like 20 feet above, and you get these nice little close-ups, and it looked great.
Turns out people just wanted apps.
But it was a great show. I don't.
It's an amazing idea. Don't get me wrong. It's just, yeah.
We were like, we have to get those. We had bought the cameras for that show because that's why I remember it so clearly. Is because we were like, we need to have great overhead cameras because
really good toys,
little tchotchkes and everything else, and it was